Hey family, my name is Eddie. I'm the lead pastor of Grace Covenant Church in Sterling, and we are going through the 5 by 5 by 5 reading plan. And that means that if you've been with us, then you're in the book of Acts and you're about at chapter 15. We're almost done with this book. We're over halfway through. Now in chapter 15, we see that Paul is beginning to address some of the questions that have been raised about what is required of believers, especially the Gentile believers. And so we see this Jerusalem council where a number of different leaders in the church come together and decide what does it look like for these Gentiles to walk out their faith. Then in chapter 16, we see that Paul actually parts ways with Barnabas, his longtime traveling companion, and he picks up this young man named Timothy, begins to disciple him, and Timothy becomes one of his ministry partners. They travel to Macedonia, and perhaps you've heard about this Macedonian call. And Paul really begins to establish what becomes the Philippian church plant. It's established with this woman named Lydia and a Philippian jailer and a number of other individuals. Then in chapter 17, Paul and Silas travel to Thessalonica, then they travel to Berea, then they travel to Athens. They are just going all throughout Asia trying to establish this gospel. Paul in chapter 18 travels to Corinth and then returns back to Antioch. And then finally, we end up in chapter 19 where he goes to Ephesus and messes everything up. The market there is filled with idolatry, and there are actually people who are making idols, and because of his ministry, he's hurting their profits. And so we see that the gospel is impacting even the economy there. And so now, if you've ever wondered, as a side note, what these maps in the back of the Bible are for, some of them hopefully will give you a picture of his ministry, so these places don't just sit as places that you've never heard of or seen, but you can actually see the map of his ministry and his mission. This can be super helpful. And so as you're progressing through this, I just want to encourage you, and I hope that your faith is being built up as you see that the gospel produces fruit really wherever Paul ministers. And that is true not only of his life, but it's also going to be true of your life, that the gospel will continue to produce fruit in your life and wherever you will take it. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey.